It is the heels that get it done. It is the villains, the ones that make us tune in. And that is why this podcast is so necessary. And superstar Billy Graham. Who are you saying? He is the man that single-handedly changed things for how wrestling is done today. Top 5 heels that should have gotten a championship run in the WWE. Yes, the ones that I say were screwed. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Heel Havoc. If this is your first time, and it should be because this is the first episode, I'm your boy Gator. And yes, if you are listening to this, you are privileged and you will have the pleasure of looking at all the world's true heroes of the wrestling ring, TV, and movies. Yes, I do not root for the hero all the time. I'm not going to have some corporate agenda throw it down my throat saying you have to cheer for the good guy because why? He is good. He is happy. He's American pride. No, it is the heels that get it done. It is the villains, the ones that make us tune in. And that is why this podcast is so necessary. Heels have never had their day. They have not had anything. They have been pushed around, shoved, and disregarded for too long. And now the heels are going to finally have their day. And I am going to bring all the glory to you. So who to talk about first and foremost? If you don't know me, I am a massive wrestling fan. I have been a wrestling fan since I was a kid. I have watched the greats walk through that ring. I have seen stadiums packed back whenever Ric Flair was still styling and profiling. Back when Roddy Piper was the man. Back when Hulk Hogan was just getting his start. Now, who do I talk about that has been the biggest impact on modern wrestling? None other than superstar Billy Graham. Who are you saying? He is the man that single-handedly changed things for how wrestling is done today. I was like, no, a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't realize how important he was to the wrestling industry. A lot of the old school wrestlers looked up to him, styled after his promos, made the appearance look. He changed everything about wrestling. How you look, how you talk, how you act. And he has not gotten enough. But today, my friends, superstar Billy Graham is going to have his day. Now, Superstorm was born Eldridge Wayne Coleman Jr., better known for everybody else as Superstar Billy Graham. He was an active wrestler from 1970 to 1987. Inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004, made a few appearances up till 2009. Now, he left. Now, back whenever then, he was wrestling at his peak. It was good guy, bad guy. There was no dark hero. There was no anti-hero. Stone Cold had not come around yet. But he also signed a Legends contract in 2015 and honored that contract until his death in 2023. Now, here's where it gets interesting. He was trained by the legendary Stu Hart, and you've all heard of the Dungeon. Stu Hart has produced some of the greatest wrestlers in the world. Hitman. Owen, rest in peace, one of the greatest wrestlers, in my opinion, to ever put in that ring. He could make anybody look good, but we'll get to Owen another day. Now, Stu Hart had a massive following. I mean, he was up there, and superstar Billy Graham fit the profile. Now, he wrestled for promotions like AWA, WWF, NWA, but he debuted under Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling up in Canada. Now, Superstar, in case you didn't know him, had the physique. He had the mic abilities. Let's just say it. He was Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan got into wrestling. He was the man. He feuded with likes of Jack Briscoe, Dusty Rhodes, Pedro Morales, Don Morocco, Harley Race, the legendary Bruno Sammartino, before dropping the belt to Bob Backlund. Now, here is one of the big things. Now, I said that we're celebrating heels. He was a bad guy during all of this. He packed stadiums. One of the things that Dusty Rhodes described matches with Graham as some of the most exciting and memorable in his career. Now, this is Dusty Rhodes saying this. Dusty Rhodes wrestled everybody. Everybody knew his. Everybody knew Dusty Rhodes' Hard Times promo that ever came out. Now, you have a heel, and he's feuding with all these other great wrestlers, all these other massive names, and he's still making it. Now, let's talk about his championship run. Now, this is a big thing. You don't even know how big this is. He beat the legendary Bruno Sammartino. He beat him on April 30th, 1977, and he held the belt till February 20th, 1978. Now I want to talk about the heels, the bad guys that had it before him. Ivan Koloff held the title for 21 days, not even a full month, not even if you count it in February. Stan Stasiak held for 9 days and then lost it back to Bruno Sammartino. Ivan Koloff lost it to Pedro Morales. I'm like, but then here comes superstar Billy Graham holding this belt for 296 days. Let me repeat that in case you missed it. 296 days, a bad guy, a heel, wore that strap. Why is this so big? Well, let's look at the other parts. Sammartino, legendary, of course. I was like, we all know he held the belt for over 1,400 days. Pedro Morales, another 1,000 a day wearer of the strap. Heels did not keep this belt. Heels only held the belt until they put it on another face. But here comes Superstar. During his run, he was a massive draw. He sold out Madison Square Garden 19 out of 20 times. Rewind. 19 out of 20 times. His popularity as a heel was unprecedented and was often more popular than the baby faces because we all love the bad guy. Secretly, we do. And if you're telling yourself we don't, you're lying. You're lying to your inner self. You got to let the bad out. Because Graham's proof that more than anything, we wanted to see the bad guy. We wanted to see the bad guy fall. And another part of that is we kept on going, and for 296 days. Now, that was the longest reign and for a long time. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But he was drawing high numbers all across the Northeast Territory, because back then it was territory wrestling until Vince McMahon made it what he is today. Anybody that says otherwise, you just don't like the man, not what he did. That's your call on that. But Graham held that title and defended it several times. Now let's talk about the heels that held it after Graham lost it. The Iron Sheik, for 28 days, lost it to Hulk Hogan, or as I like to say, Superstar 2.0. Superstar as a babyface is all Hulk Hogan was. He modeled everything after him, including his pythons, all the look, everything. That was his whole genre. So Hulk Hogan looked up to Superstar Billy Graham, along with a lot of other wrestlers that modeled a lot of things after him. But then Andre, he had the title after the mysteriousness of the referee, Double Earl. And he only had it for about 30 seconds, and then he handed it to Ted DiBiase. Vacated after 8 days during all the controversy. To be honest, I think was another mistake. I'll get to that later on, because that could have been a massive draw for a lot of different reasons. DiBiase, a master of the mic, great ring skills. I would have let him run with that, but they missed that, so we'll say okay. Now, after that, Sergeant Slaughter was next. 64 days, lost it to Hulk Hogan. That was back in his Iran sympathizer days. And yes, we were big on America, Hulkamania running wild. Then The Undertaker, 6 days, lost to Hulk Hogan with controversy, might I add. The belt was then vacated. Ric Flair had the belt twice as a heel in the WWE. He had it for 77 days and 41 days. So not even covering 3 months in total, not even getting 4 months. Yokozuna. Now, a lot of y'all don't remember Yoko. You should. He was the most agile big man, in my opinion, the history of WWE. So he lost immediately to Hulk Hogan in the WrestleMania 9. I was like, he had it for like 45 or maybe 3 minutes and he was done. I was like, but then after he beat Hulk Hogan for the belt at SummerSlam, he had that belt for 280 days. He is the longest reigning besides superstar Billy Graham to this date. But then he eventually dropped it to Bret Hart at WrestleMania, of course. Big match, got to plan it on WrestleMania. But if you look at, you can go down the list, and it's changed a little bit now, but the history of wrestling has always been to use the heel to put out your next baby face, to put out your next hero, and then shove it down people's throats. I'm tired of that myself. I think that the heels deserve their day. You wouldn't look at Roman Reigns. It wasn't his babyface persona that held that title for so long. It was his heel persona that held that title for so long because they wanted more of people. They wanted the hero to climb the ladder and try to knock off Roman. And that just shows you exactly what this world of wrestling is all about. We love to see the heel fall, but when that heel doesn't fall, it makes us that more hungrier. That's why I say the heels get it done. But you always use a heel to transfer title, not a serious run. But that's where Superstar really changed the game. His little 296-day hold, and he should have went longer, to be honest. He should have held that title until they stopped selling out arenas, because that might have been another 2 years. Because Superstar had the mic skills, he had the physique, he had the look, the mic, and he had it all. But then, he proved it whenever he was packing these stadiums out. And then, back then, it was Vince McMahon Sr., not Jr., hadn't taken over yet. Mr. McMahon hadn't taken over. So, but they dropped the ball. Now, did they just not have a baby face big enough to him? Eventually, Bob Backlund was the one that beat Superstar. And I was like, I have a feeling they took too long and they messed that up. Not to say anything about Mr. America Wrestling, Bob Backlund. He was a fan favorite back in the day. I personally liked his crazy Bob Backlund myself. I was like, when he came back into the WWE, that was the interesting one. But we'll get to that another date as well. But Superstar changed it. He shows that heels can draw just as much as the baby faces, as just as much as Bruno Sammartino, as Pedro Morales, and yes, even Hulk Hogan in his prime. Superstar changed the game in wrestling. He really, I was like, the heels that have held the, let's just talk about the heels that have held the belt longer than Superstar Billy Graham. This won't take too long to go through this list because there's only two in the history of the WWE heels that have held the belt longer than Superstar Billy Graham. That would be Brock Lesnar. Yes, Brock Lesnar is more of an anti-hero, but I still count him. He had that run as a heel where everybody hated him for so long. Me, I just hated the fact he didn't defend it longer. I was like, of course, him with Paul Heyman, always representing the heels. Now, the other one, we already talked about it, Roman Reigns. That is it. That is the only two heels in the history of the WWE that have held that belt longer than Superstar Billy Graham. Superstar showed the world the formula for making great wrestling. He showed them the formula for how to keep people interested. He showed them how to get it done. He was the simplicity of what wrestling needed. Now, Why was he so important to the wrestling world? Okay, now I've just explained the title, the runs. Let's tell why. Uh, how many wrestlers over the years have used Superstar as a prototype for their success? Let me count the ways. First and foremost, I already talked about it. Hulk Hogan molded himself after Graham. And literally, I ain't talking about just little bitty things. I mean the physique, the mic, how he talked. Brother. Yes, even brother, as it was used by Billy Graham first. The 24-inch pythons. Yes, Billy Graham said it first. Hulk Hogan was Billy Graham as a babyface, and that's what got him over so much because he knew Graham had something that nobody else had, and he took every bit of it. Of course, he stole a couple things from other people, but that's neither here nor there. I was like, but that Graham basically was Hulk Hogan, like I said it a couple times. Over and over, he was Graham 2.0. He was just Graham as a babyface. But after Graham came out and he had the physique, he had the muscles. Now every wrestler is focused on the physique and the bodybuilding look, showing off the muscles. Randy Savage loved showing off muscles with the baby oil. So much that Andre was like, no oil. But yes, he changed that as well. Because if you go back to the 60s, 70s, and most of the 80s, look at Hacksaw, Jim Duggan. He wasn't built. Look at the Sheik. Now, Sheik was incredibly strong. He had a mindset and he was strong and built on it. But, back then, the heels were the ones with the physique and everything. Just a handful of them, though. Everybody else was just a regular, plain Jane, everyday guy and just trying to get over with the fans. Superstar had it all to get it over with the fans. But now every wrestler's trying to copy that. A big one, big supporter of that is the former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, that was heavily inspired by Superstar Billy Graham. From his look to the boas to the glasses to his tights, everything, Jesse Ventura molded a lot of how he does things after Graham, including his heel persona. I think Jesse Ventura was one of the greatest heels in history, could rock the mic like none other. He was Billy Graham on a smaller scale, in my opinion. Now, but you go back to the big names. Scott Steiner, look at his physique. Definitely inspired by Billy Graham. Ric Flair, great mic skills, included by Billy Graham. Macho Man, yes, the physique, the Macho Man, Randy Savage, his flamboyant outfits, inspired directly by Billy Graham. Triple H, and there was other superstars influenced by Billy Graham. That's just a handful of the big names. But if you go back, he changed everything on how wrestlers did to how they worked out. You look at Lex Luger. You look at all of the big names that changed how they did. Ultimate Warrior, his physique, definitely inspired by Billy Graham. Without Graham, the wrestling world would look a lot different today. His influence is larger than life personality, pioneered wrestling for decades. It made the mic skills just as or more important than your wrestling ability. He made the look, the physique. Not only can you pick somebody up, but you needed to look like you could pick someone up and slam them and throw them around the ring. That is what Billy Graham, whenever he stepped into that ring, he was the biggest guy. He had the biggest arms. He looked like he could take him and throw him 10 rows up into the audience. That changed wrestling because now it leveled up. Now you had to have the look as well as the mic skills. You couldn't just be some random guy coming out with last year's beer belly and be like, let's do this. Graham, more than anything, showed the promoters that a heel can be the top guy. And if you look at wrestling and what it is today, that is absolutely 100% factual. Because no longer is a heel just someone that's going to transfer the belt. They can grab that belt and run with it. You look at John Cena, the most interesting thing about this past year was his heel turn. Everybody couldn't believe their eyes. They couldn't fathom it. I personally was like, yes, now we're going to get a part of Cena we haven't seen. And it was interesting again. His character needed that. if nothing else, to the end while he was champion. And he held that belt for about 5 months before he dropped it back to Cody. To be honest, I would have wrote that a little bit differently. I would have had him retire with the belt, like change the belt design altogether, give it to someone new, starting in Royal Rumble. But that's how I would have wrote that, because to me, I think if you're going to be the never seen 17, you need to retire with that belt because you own that belt now. So Graham coming in, showing that he can pack out arenas. He can be the top guy. The heel can pack the place, and a heel can give fans more than a hero ever can. As a heel superstar, he gave the fans a reason to unite to see the bad guy lose. Because nothing brings everybody together like hating someone. Man, they hated him. They wanted him to lose. They couldn't wait. So everybody was cheering against him until someone finally beat him. And that is the biggest thing that he ever did for wrestling. Because until then, the only people that could draw were the baby faces. Everybody wanted to be liked. Everybody wanted to be enjoyed or wanted to be the fan friendly. Yes, I'm going to kiss the children and slap the mamas. Yes, that is what it is. And if you look at wrestling today, heels can hold that belt just as long as a face because of Billy Graham got it all started. So my salute, my first Heel Havoc podcast is my salute to superstar Billy Graham. May you rest in peace, brother, because you changed wrestling for the better. Now, speaking of changing it for the better, I'm going to do a top 5. Top 5 heels that should have gotten a championship run in the WWE. Yes, the ones that I say were screwed, that the WWE screwed us by not giving us the title runs by these wrestlers. Now, who could be number 5? Oh dear, let's go with Rick Rude. He had feuds with Warrior, massive draw on those. They got real interesting, always kept you into it. And he had feuds with the Snake, Jake himself. But they never got the strap put on him except for the IC title. Why is that? Rick Rude had the physique, he had the talent, he had the ability, but they didn't put the strap on him. Wonder why? Because they wanted to give it to a babyface. They wanted to give it to the hero. Hulk Hogan, always keeping people down, backstage politics, things like that. But Rick Rude, I think we were denied. We should have at least had a 3-month run with him, especially while he was feuding with the Warrior. Mentioned earlier, Owen Hart. May you rest in peace. Man, this is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Not only could he make any wrestler look good in that ring, and I do mean any wrestler. Guy coming in, hadn't strapped up his boots at all, put him with Owen. Owen will make him look good because he was the great technical. Some dare say better than Bret, but I think it's too close to call myself. But Owen had an immense talent as a technical wrestler that could make anybody look way better than their skill set. But his mic skills were on point as well. Now, his mic skills, I will say, are better than his brother Bret's, because Owen got it done. He made you hate him no matter who he was with. That is something that not everybody can say. Some people always have that 1 or 2 fans in there, but no, everybody united against Owen because he knew how to twist the strings. I think we were denied a full WWE championship. I would have loved to see Owen wrestle it out. I think the feuds that he could have been in would have been some of the best matches in history. Now, number 3. I've already hinted on this earlier. Ted DiBiase. Yes, technically had the belt, goes unrecognized. But he was an above-average wrestler with superior mic skills. And I do mean superior. Man, you hated this guy whenever he'd walk out. He'd go to buy a stick of gum or a little pack of gum, pay with a $100 bill. People hated that kind of crap. He was the epitome of what people hated in this country. I was like, and he, with his mic skills, he would get on. You would hate him no matter what. And they could have brought heat every single event and kept the arenas packed, in my opinion, if you would have just let DiBiase hold that belt. I would have made him held that belt to WrestleMania and then wrestle Hogan. That would have been a match. Now, yes, we've already kind of seen that, but I still think that would have been a big lead up to it. Either Hogan, Macho Man, because Macho Man was a face at the time, but it could have been such a wonderful build up of hate and just awesomeness. Now, number two. Now, a lot of people are going to agree with this because, in my opinion, this guy had it all. Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. Excellent technical wrestler. Great on the mic. Perfection in every single way. His run could have been the things that legends are made of. He wouldn't have been limited by wrestling technical or power, as he could compete with both. Not every wrestler could do that. Now, you saw like Undertaker, Bret Hart, they would wrestle and they would have to change their styles to suit the other one's abilities. But Mr. Perfect could go power for power. He could go technical wrestling. He could have he could have been main eventing for a long time because he could have made so many people look good and had great matches. I think he was, my opinion, I was like a very close second, but he could have been a perfect WWE champion. Now let's go with some honorable mentions here because I like to. There were some that I just couldn't get into my top five, but I needed to make sure that they had their day. The Bad News Brown. Now, if you don't remember Bad News Brown, he was the meanest thing on two legs coming out to that ring. He didn't care who you were. He was the first true anti hero, in my opinion, because he didn't care if you were a bad guy or a good guy. He was doing it his way. In my opinion, he was the first true anti hero. But everybody loved to hate him because he just did things his way and didn't care. The Honky Tonk Man. Solid worker with great mic skills. I have to contribute a lot of that to the great Jimmy Hart because he would get on there with that microphone and keep going as well. But it was a great, he was a great IC champion, one of the greatest. If I was like, I think Gunther took that away from him. Now, Bam Bam Bigelow. Now, I got him on here. Wouldn't have expected him to have a big title run, but he was a big man with agility, which just did not get too much of that. I think he would have made a great championship run for at least 60 to 90 days. Haku, the legitimate tough guy of the WWE. Every wrestler that's ever talked about him said he's like the toughest thing on two legs, that he was a legitimate tough guy, not just a wrestling tough guy, a legitimate tough guy. He wasn't much on the mic, but you don't have to be when you got Bobby the Brain Heenan managing. You just sit back there, let Bobby do all the talking, and you just go out there and do your thing in the ring. Wouldn't have needed that skill. Bobby Heenan was, I was like, Paul Heyman before Paul Heyman was Paul Heyman. Heenan was that guy. And of course, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. He had the look, and I'm talking about the heel version against Hogan, not the buddy with Hogan. He had the look, had the size, and he fit the whole diagram of what a wrestler should be. He could have been a great champion had they just put the strap on him. Now, let's get to the number one I think should have held that strap. Rowdy Roddy Piper. He was decent in the ring. He had good wrestling abilities, but he had godlike mic skills. He was on there. He would make you hate him in a matter of minutes. He's one of the few wrestlers that have been stabbed or shot outside of the ring because people hated him that much. They were ready to go to jail over how much they hated him. He had mic skills that toppled others. People would have just paid so they don't miss him losing the belt because everybody would have been packed out every single week to wait to see him lose that strap. And the more times he kicked out and walked out with that strap, the more hungrier people would have gotten to see it. This, in my opinion, if he would have had that strap, you could have left it on him for 1 to 2 years and you would have never missed a beat as far as sales because people would have dove to see him lose that belt. Ah, man. Oh, it's been such a great first episode. Can't believe it's coming to an end. Now, to give you a little hint of my next week's episode, next show, we're going to dive directly into my favorite, misunderstood, true hero of the Walking Dead universe, Negan. Yes, I said hero because if you think of Negan as anything else but a true hero, you are incorrect. The villains did what they did to Negan. The villains won that day. But till that day, I'll see you next week. And remember, till then, remember, tune in to HEEL HAVOC. Like, subscribe, follow, because here, it's good to be bad.